What's up, guys? One of the most important components of any listening system, whether it's professional, in studio, home theater, etc., is your studio monitors, your actual speakers. Now, there's a lot of different speakers out there. There are a lot of debates about which speakers are the best and why. The whole point of studio monitors in a professional environment is, of course, to reproduce your sounds as accurately as possible so you can really hear what's going on with your sound, fix any problems that might exist there, and then have those sound mixes translate to every other system as best as possible. The other big component when you're selecting speakers is to find some that aren't going to fatigue your ears, so you can listen to them for a long period of time while you're mixing or you're editing, and that way you're not getting tired and kind of having your ear distort your perception of your audio. You can actually listen for a long time, like 8 or 10 or 12 hours a day, and still hear accurately. Today I want to talk a little bit about Kali Audio's Lone Pine series of speakers, specifically the LP-6s. Now, the LP-6s are sort of entry-level price point speakers, but they give you a lot of bang for your buck, and I want to get into all the different features that they've got. Real quick, if you enjoy these videos and you want to support my channel, head on over to alexknickerbocker.com. I just launched a new version of my website where I've got a huge range of royalty-free sound effects that you can purchase and use in any project you might be working on. They're all recorded with top-quality gear, and they're tagged with professional metadata just like you'd find in a major studio's sound effects library. You can also donate as well if you want. It really helps me spend more time on this channel focusing on making major studio workflows accessible to everybody. Real quick, a little bit of background on Kali Audio. These are guys that came from JBL, and JBL is a huge speaker manufacturer that makes a lot of really high-end professional theater and studio monitors. I've had a lot of listening experience on their 7 series, the 708s, the 705s in major studio environments, and they're fantastic. I really love those speakers. Kali Audio has brought some of those same ideas and technologies and theories behind speaker construction to the entry-level price point range, which is amazing. First great thing about them is their frequency response. A lot of entry-level or sort of low-budget speakers don't have the most accurate reproduction of sound, and so you'll see frequency response charts that really don't look anything like the ideal curve that they should be. These speakers are actually very, very honest, and they reveal a lot of problems with sound so that you can fix them in a studio environment, which is excellent. They also have a pretty forgiving sweet spot when you're sitting in front of them, so you can get that accurate representation even if you're not exactly in the center of where you should be sitting in theory, because let's face it, a lot of studio environments have become more like home studios, where it's not an ideal space. Maybe it's a square room, maybe it's too small, maybe it's too large. These speakers fit really well into a space like that, not only because of the sweet spot, but also because Kali has put on each speaker sort of a boundary EQ that will shape the sound of the speaker based on its placement in a room. That's really great because in smaller environments or home studio environments, sometimes you've got your speakers right up against a wall, which is not ideal. You should have at least, 2 feet of space between your speaker and the actual wall of the room. You can't really get away with that in a lot of home studio environments, so they've built in these switches at the back of them so that you can just flip one on depending on the placement of the speaker, and it will shape the audio, shape the frequency response of the speaker to the room and the placement that you're working with. Another thing Kali does that's really helpful is they include really detailed documentation with these speakers, so you can get all of the information that you would want on third harmonic distortion and max SPL, as well as crossover frequencies, pretty much anything that you could desire if you're really diving into the studio monitor realm. And they've got a lot of charts and graphs that show you exactly what these speakers are capable of. Another really important feature of these speakers is the waveguide that's built into the actual enclosure. The purpose of this is really just to diffuse sound coming out of the speaker off of the speaker itself, so that the enclosure isn't coloring anything that you're hearing above and beyond the direct sound coming out of the drivers. And what that ends up translating to is a really well-defined image between the speakers, so you get a very clear representation of where your sounds are in a stereo or a surround space, and you're not having to kind of guess whether your speakers are actually giving you an accurate representation of how things are panned or how they sound. And speaking of how they sound, that's kind of the whole point of speakers. Listening back to these, it's a really pleasant listening experience. Again, they're very honest speakers, especially at the entry-level price point, but they're not too harsh, they're not fatiguing, and they're not too accentuated in any one part of the frequency spectrum. A really important factor with something like music mixing is getting clear and crisp vocals. These speakers actually kind of sweeten the mid-range a little bit, so things are a little bit more listenable, while they also have kind of a pronounced low frequency and high frequency response. So you end up with a really nice starting point to go from with your sound. If you have too much low end in your mixes, these speakers are going to show you that. They have a very pronounced low end because they've got 6.5-inch drivers in them. If you have a lot of top end in your mixes, maybe it's too bright, too harsh, this will reveal that as well because it's really pronounced in the top end. The sort of scooped mid-range is great because it's not going to fatigue your ears as quickly, and it's also going to be pretty revealing. As soon as something starts sounding too harsh or too pronounced there, you'll really know because it's not going to sound as smooth and as sweet as these speakers do right out of the box. And that goes for the post-sound side of things too. It's really easy to get muddy mixes and have dialogue get obscured or have your music overpower everything else if you're not careful. And these speakers will reveal when that's happening. So it's really great to be able to balance everything in. And again, get your stereo or surround image really dialed in because these speakers have a really accurate representation of where your sounds are panned. I've only got two caveats for these speakers, really. The first is that they actually are a little bit quieter in their output in general than other speakers that I've used. So I've had to turn up the levels on these much higher than I had to on my Genelecs just to get the same levels. And I'm still kind of having those compete with each other a little bit. The Genelecs can go a little bit louder and not have as much noise floor of just the speaker being on. The Calis being a little bit quieter, I've had to turn them up all the way, and then you get a little bit of a noise floor, just a little bit of speaker hiss, which I don't necessarily like, but again, for the price point and for everything else that I'm demanding of them, it's pretty much a small complaint to have. The other thing that I haven't been able to verify yet, but I've heard from multiple different sources, is that the waveguide technology that's built in here actually doesn't work very well when you lay these speakers on their sides. And obviously I've got these speakers on their sides here. Many studios, and especially home studios, don't have as much real estate to put speakers in exactly the way that they necessarily should be. So if that's the case, and I'll have to listen to them a little bit more to figure that out, that can be a limiting factor in how I'm actually going to be able to set this room up. So maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but it's definitely something to pay attention to when you're buying any set of speakers, not just these. All that being said, I think these are a fantastic set of speakers for entry-level budgets, especially if you're considering something like the KRK Rocket series or maybe the Yamaha HS series. The KRK Rockets are really low-end heavy to my ears, and they kind of obscure a lot of things that I want to hear about my mixes. The Yamaha HS series is a little bit too punchy in the mid-range and not enough in the low end, and typically you have to pair them with a subwoofer in order to get a real response out of them. So I generally don't like having to buy more components and take up more real estate than I have to. I think these are a really good compromise of great low-end performance, honest top-end performance. They've got a nice scooped mid-range that I can listen to for hours without getting ear fatigue, and especially if you're starting to look into immersive audio, working with things like ambisonics or doing things for VR or gaming or in Dolby Atmos at home. Those are all really new and interesting technologies that are coming out. The Kali LP-6s are a really great option to get maybe 10 or 12 of them up in a room without having to spend, $15,000 on studio monitors just to get the basics of those kinds of environments. So if you fit into any of those categories, or you just want a great sounding set of speakers for a lower price point, I think the Kali Audio LP-6s and the LP-8s are a great option, and I'd personally take them over any other professional studio monitor in the price point. So hopefully some of that info was helpful. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to hit like, hit subscribe. I'm over on Instagram at AXK, so come follow me over there. And as always, thanks for watching.